The alien cadets expected a fight. Instead, the war beast knelt before the human. The door at the far end of the enclosure had not even finished sliding open when Sigma-9 charged it. I was sitting in the observation gallery with 38 other cadets, all of us pressed against the reinforced glass, watching the war beast slam into the interior gate with enough force to shake the floor beneath our feet. The sound reached us a half-second later, a low metallic thunder that rolled through the walls and into our chests. Several cadets jumped back from the glass. I gripped the railing in front of me so hard my knuckles ached. Sigma-9 was 8 feet of layered armor and engineered rage. Its 4 rear legs were built like hydraulic pistons. Its forward limbs ended in hooked claws that had been measured, in documented trials, at a tensile strength sufficient to tear through the hull plating of a light-class transport vessel. It had been in isolation for 7 months. And it remembered, very clearly, that every time a door opened, something came through that door to hurt it. Our instructor, a tall Vareth named Commander Yael Oren, stood at the front of the gallery with her arms clasped behind her back. She had the posture of someone watching weather, attentive but unworried. She let Sigma-9 exhaust one charge against the gate before she spoke. The Kethvar were created 260 years ago by the Dominion Council, as a solution to an insurgency problem, she said. They are not animals, they are not machines, they are fully cognizant beings who were engineered to suppress everything except combat instinct, then placed in situations designed to keep that instinct permanently activated. She paused. The Dominion fell. The Kethvar did not. There are 412 of them still alive across various containment facilities. Every standard reactivation protocol involves a Tier 6 armored handler team and a sedation grid. Sigma-9 had stopped charging. It was pacing now, that low grinding sound coming from deep in its throat, its great head swinging back and forth as it read the air for threat signatures. Today, said Commander Oren, we are not using any of that. She touched a panel. The secondary door at ground level opened. A woman walked in. She was, by my best estimate, somewhere in her mid-40s in Terran years. Her hair was brown and cut short and slightly uneven, as if she had trimmed it herself without looking too carefully. She wore a plain gray work uniform with no insignia and no visible equipment. She carried nothing. Her hands were open at her sides. She walked in at a pace I can only describe as unhurried, not slow with fear, not stiff with false confidence, just unhurried. The way a person walks into a room they have been in before and are not especially worried about. Sigma-9 stopped pacing. I watched its entire body change register. The pacing rhythm broke. The great head came around and locked onto the woman with an absolute unbroken focus. The combat spines along its back elevated. The secondary sensory clusters around its jaw began moving, reading her heart rate, her chemical signature, the electrical field of her nervous system. Everything it needed to calculate a threat level. Every cadet in that gallery stopped breathing. The woman walked to roughly the center of the enclosure and sat down on the floor, cross-legged, her hands resting on her knees with her palms turned upward and open. She looked at Sigma-9 the way you might look at something you were genuinely glad to see after a long time apart. The war beast began to move toward her. It did not charge. That was the first thing that surprised me. It should have charged. Every archived engagement recording I had studied showed the Kethvar closing distance immediately when a target was isolated and stationary. They were built to read stillness as vulnerability, and vulnerability as an invitation. But Sigma-9 moved slowly, testing, uncertain of something. Its spines were still raised, but its movement had changed into something that the tactical vocabulary I had spent 2 years building had no good word for. Cadet Dren Alice was beside me. He is from a species that communicates in part through skin color, and his forearms had gone a pale, anxious gray. "What is she doing?" he said, not really asking anyone, just saying it into the air because silence felt impossible. The woman spoke. We heard it through the audio relay a moment after her mouth moved. Her voice was even, unhurried, the same as her walk. She said, "I know you are having a hard time. I know no one has been here. I am here now." Sigma-9 stopped. 4 meters away. Close enough that if it chose to lunge, the distance would be nothing. Its claws were on the enclosure floor and I could see the tension in them, the way the hooks pressed slightly into the composite material, the body trying to decide. The woman did not look away from it. She did not look down, did not look at the walls or the ceiling or find any of the 100 small objects in a room that terrified eyes tend to find instead of the thing that terrifies them. She looked directly at Sigma-9, not as a challenge. It was not a hard look. I struggled to name what it was, because my species does not make that look often, and when we do it is usually between parents and very young children, or between people who have known each other across decades. It was the look of someone who sees another person fully, and is not frightened by what they see. she said. You are not broken. You are not dangerous. You are tired and alone, and no one told you that was allowed to change. I am telling you now. One of Sigma 9's front limbs shifted. The claw lifted from the floor, just slightly. The audio system caught a sound from its throat that the translator flagged as unclassified. Not a combat vocalization. Not a warning. Something the combat-focused linguistics database did not have a category for. The woman lifted her right hand, palm up, open. She held it out toward the war beast the way you might offer something to an animal that has been hurt, slowly, visibly, making no sudden move, just making the offer clear and leaving the choice entirely to the other party. Sigma 9's head lowered. It took one step forward, then another. The spines along its back were still partially raised, but they were no longer rigid. They moved now with its breathing, rising and falling slightly, and I realized with a shock that ran from my neck down to my feet that this was not a combat posture. This was something else entirely. It pressed its head against her palm. The gallery did not make a sound. I am not sure any of us were capable of it. The woman's hand moved slowly along the side of Sigma 9's face, between its left sensory cluster and its forward spine, and she kept talking. I could not make out the words anymore. The audio relay caught the rhythm but not the content, a low and continuous murmur like a current running beneath still water. Sigma 9's massive body was trembling slightly. Not with aggression. Something released, the way a structure under enormous sustained pressure trembles when the pressure finally, after a very long time, lets go. Then it knelt. Slowly. The rear legs folded first, the great body descending with a controlled and deliberate weight, and then the front limbs settled, and Sigma 9's head came to rest in the woman's lap. She put both hands on it, and she did not pull away, and she did not show any sign of wanting to. She sat there on the hard floor of the enclosure with 800 pounds of engineered apex predator resting against her, and the war beast made that low, unclassified sound again, and again, and again, like something that had at last, after 7 months, been given permission to exist without fighting. Commander Oren let the silence run for a long time before she spoke. The woman in that enclosure is Dr. Claire Weston, she said. She holds a doctorate in xeno-emotional psychology from the University of New Bristol. She is not a soldier. She has no combat training and no augmentations. She weighs approximately 61 kilograms. A pause. She has done this with 26 Kethvar. Every single one responded identically to what you are watching now. Her waiting list across active containment facilities is currently 49 designations long. Dren's forearms had shifted from gray to something I could not quite categorize. Lighter, complex. She just talked to it, he said. She did, said Commander Oren. That is all she did. That is all she did. I watched Dr. Weston below us. She had not moved. Her hands were still on Sigma 9's head, and she was still talking. That low, continuous thread, and the war beast's eyes had half closed. The combat spines had fully retracted now. They lay flat against its back, and its breathing had slowed to something regular and deep. One of the older cadets, a Varath named San Auric who had already completed his first deployment rotation, said quietly, "What does it mean that no one tried this before?" No one answered right away. The question sat in the gallery and took up space. Commander Oren led it. She was not the kind of instructor who filled silences to hear her own voice. After a moment she said, "It means we looked at the Kethvar and saw what they could do, and we responded to that. We built containment protocols and sedation grids and armored handler teams because those were the logical responses to a threat. We treated them as threats because they behaved like threats." She looked at the enclosure. Dr. Weston's question, when she first proposed this program, was simply, why are they behaving like threats? She asked whether the behavior and the nature were the same thing. And they are not, I said. And they are not. I thought about the 7 months Sigma 9 had spent in that white room. I thought about what it means to be a cognizant being, to think, to feel, to carry memory, and to be placed in a space where the only stimulus you receive, day after day, is isolation. To be built with social instinct and then given nothing to socialize with. To be built for purpose and then given no purpose except existing inside walls that do not change. I thought about how a creature like that would eventually compress everything it felt into the only expression available to it. How pain, over enough time, reorganizes itself into whatever shape the environment permits. And the environment of a containment facility permits aggression far more readily than it permits grief. Dr. Weston had walked into that enclosure and simply treated the aggression as information rather than identity. She had looked at a war beast and seen, beneath the threat display and the charging and the 7 months of compressed fury, something that was hurting, and did not know that hurt was allowed to end. She had been afraid, I was certain of that. Whatever steadiness she carried into that room, it was not the absence of fear. It was something harder and rarer than that. Fear held carefully in both hands and walked through a door anyway, because the thing on the other side of the door needed someone to walk through it. Commander Oren spoke one more time before she ended the session. She said, "In your tactical training, you have spent considerable time learning when and how to apply force. That knowledge is real, and it has value, and you will use it. But force applied without understanding the thing you are forcing is not strategy, it is habit." Dr. Weston's program has achieved in 6 years what 2.5 centuries of containment protocol did not. Not because she is more powerful than a Tier 6 handler team, because she asked a different question. She let that settle. Below us, Sigma 9 slept. Its chest rose and fell in long, slow rhythms. Dr. Weston sat with it and kept one hand on its spine ridge, and looked at nothing in particular with the expression of someone who has just finished something difficult, and is very quietly glad. I stayed at the glass after the other cadets began filing out. I watched the enclosure until the light in the gallery dimmed. I kept thinking about what Son Auric had said, what it means that no one tried this before, not as accusation because I did not think blame was the point, as a real question, as a question worth sitting with. We had looked at the Kethvar and seen the end of the Dominion. We had seen 412 reasons to build better walls. We had built them. We had called that practical. We had called that necessary. We had not been wrong exactly. We had just been incomplete. Dr. Claire Weston, 61 kilograms, no armor, no augmentations, doctorate from New Bristol, walked into rooms that had ended organizations, and sat on the floor and said the thing that turned out, across 26 separate documented cases, to always be true. You are not broken, you are tired, and that is allowed to change. I signed up for her seminar before I went to sleep that night. She had 47 cadets on her waiting list by morning.